Check out these lovely plants. I grew them all myself. Joking. Now, I'm a little bit worried about planting these out because of slug attacks. Have you got any advice for me? Now, if you're a novice gardener like me, I would love it if you would consider subscribing to my channel and cheer me on from the sidelines. All you need to do is tap the red button marked subscribe, and that means next time you open the YouTube app on your phone, your laptop or your computer, one of my videos will be waiting for you. As a novice gardener, I've just got to accept that I'm interested in reaping the rewards from my garden in terms of cut flowers, but I'm not interested at all in growing things from seed, pricking them out and potting them on. So I've outsourced that. So I've got myself some penstemon, which is a gift from a friend. I've been to our local plant stall in town and picked myself up 3 campanulas. My sister, who's in the know, has told me that I've left it quite late to plant these, but I am nervous about those slugs, so we'll just have to wait and see. I've also got myself some dahlias. I've got absolutely no idea on the size of the flowers, the variety, the shape of the flowers, but I do know they've come from a good old-fashioned source, and I bought them direct from an old gentleman gardener who had set up a plant stall in his front garden in Ramsgate. I visited recently with my friends Jan and Lisa. We were off to a jumble sale and got waylaid by the lure of plants for sale. I also bought this delphinium from him. It'll be quite a good substitute for the delphinium I planted out recently, which I managed to overwinter, but the slugs seem to have attacked it. So that's the question of today's video. I am nervous about putting these things in my garden because I don't want them to be eaten up. Do you have any slug advice for me? I've had my Canterbury bells for a couple of weeks and they've been sitting out on the patio, but these are recent purchases from the plant stall in town. Ericiums, the perpetual wallflower in Bowls Mauve. So they like full sun. And I know these will survive in the garden because my husband's got them on his side of the garden. Now, he gave me a top bit of advice here. He says that all the plants that you buy from proper growers commercially are always sprayed with insecticide. And what he does is he always cuts the flowers off, because what happens is the nectar-seeking insects in your garden will come and find the flowers, and then actually they will die, not the flowers but the insects, because they get caught by the insecticides. So he always cuts the flower heads off, and then over time the insecticide washes out, and then when the flowers come into bloom again, you can be assured that they're actually doing the job for those nectar loving insects. I've just shown you some of the fluffy cosmos there, and this is zinnia. So my sister, who loves growing things from seeds and pricking them out and potting them on, was very kindly done all the hard work for me, and she says that these are all ready to plant out. So that is my job, not so much for the day but for the week, little and often, to get these out in the garden and hope Mr. Slug doesn't hit me. I'm filming this video over several days in May, and of course May means no mow May. So how are you getting on with your lawn mowing regime? We always do no mow May, but instead of leaving the whole garden to go wild, my husband likes to leave certain parts of the lawn at different heights. That just means that those native plants get a chance to grow up a little bit without them being constantly cut down by the lawnmower, so the flowers are able to develop, and then that attracts native pollinators, which is all good for biodiversity and the life cycle of your garden. And Maggie the dog certainly seems to approve. There she is, drinking out of our wildlife pond. If you've been watching my gardening videos for a while, you'll know I hate digging holes, so I'm putting it off for the moment. I'm checking up on my seedlings. I didn't like growing things from seed, but these were the seeds that I could just cast direct into the ground. So this, from memory, is cornflower. I think it's taken about 10 days to germinate. My mint has germinated too, but the other seeds I sowed have shown no signs of life. Now, I think part of the reason may be because of my laziness. I was very careful taking my sister's advice about preparing my seed beds, and it's exactly what I did with the cornflower. And then I got lazier and lazier with the subsequent 5 packets of seeds that I sowed. So I think probably that's my own fault. Putting off the digging for a moment, I've decided that in true proper gardener style, I'm going to place my pots on the soil to see where I'm going to plant them. So I'm starting off with my dahlias. I don't know whether you watched the video I posted last time round when I think I discovered some dahlia tubers that hadn't come up. So in the hope that last year's dahlias do rejuvenate themselves, I'm going to add my other dahlias to them, and then I should have a good cutting patch for later in the summer. You know that old adage about too many cooks spoiling the broth? Well, I will say this is my part of the garden. That is my husband's trough of lavender. He thought he'd found an empty spot to put it in, but I know what's planted underneath there because I've written it all down in my Linda Varta gardening journal. So I'm moving his trough somewhere else in the garden so that I can get on and do gardening in my part of the garden. My plan for the cosmos, I've got a lot of cosmos, is I'm going to have it in a drift towards the end of my plot. And can you see where all the foliage is from the daffodils? That will be dying back very soon, so I don't want to end up with a gap. So my idea is that I'm going to flummox these slugs by planting my cosmos in amongst the existing daffodil foliage, and then when that dies back, hopefully my cosmos will be strong enough to withstand any brutal slug damage. I'm also mindful of the fact as well that this part of the garden's under the shade of quite a tall maple tree, and the soil underneath is quite dry. So it's been raining recently, and I just sort of made a mental note of where the wet patches were and where the dry patches were, and I'm confining my cosmos to the outer edge of this part of the plot because that's where it's going to get most moisture when it rains. I'm loading up my next tray to take down to the garden, and I'm just thinking, am I actually going to plant these out today? And I didn't, and therefore I spent the night worrying that my poor vulnerable plants were going to get eaten overnight. And I think in hindsight I should have just taken out 10 at a time and planted them instead of wanting to place all of them and feel like I was clearing off the top surface of my patio table. And then I moved my basket. This is what I use as a sort of temporary collection space for all my garden cuttings. And it's where the slugs have been hiding, big, thick and juicy. So I gathered them up using my garden fork and trowel and then tossed them into the end of the garden, into the woodland bit, in the hope that they would have plenty to munch up there and they would leave my fine flowers alone. It's a day or so later now, and I'm pleased to report that the pots have survived. Nothing has so far been eaten, but I know I need to get on with this job. And what I'm going to do is sort of quarter the garden up and not try and plant all my plants in one go, just going section by section to break up the job a little bit. So using my garden trowel, I'm digging a pot-shaped sized hole, and then I am watering in the hole. I'm just discovering as well that the plants are quite dry, and really I should have watered them all first of all, but here I'm doing a double duty by watering my hole and also watering the delphinium at the same time. But I guess as long as I water them in well afterwards, hopefully they won't be drying out. It's then a matter of squeezing the plant pot to release the root ball, and then I'm teasing out the roots so that they can grow freely into the soil and won't be confined into that plant pot shape, and then pushing the soil back into the hole and firming my plant in so it doesn't rock around, and then a final watering from the top. Campanulas next, and then I'm going to move on to the dahlias. That was about as much as I could manage in one go, just fitting in the gardening around the rest of my life. And then I got up at 6:30 in the morning to finish the job off, and quickly discovered when you start gardening without having had a cup of tea or any breakfast, the standing up and stooping down really makes you quite lightheaded. And now what am I going to do about slug control? I've read that using coffee grounds is a good way of keeping your slugs at bay. And when we were on holiday last year, I picked up this bag of coffee grounds from a local garden we visited. So I opened it today. What's that got to be? 6 or 9 months since I first picked it up. And boy was I glad that that paper bag was plastic lined. I'd imagined the coffee grinds were going to be dry, but it was a wet, tarry mess. In fact, when I started to spread it out over the garden, it looked like the dog had not been doing her business in her designated area. It is quite disgusting to look at. I ended up getting a tablespoon from the kitchen drawer so I could dollop it all out over the beds. It just looks really horrible, but perhaps the smell and the look will put those slugs off. Who knows? Do let me know in the comment what your favourite slug deterrent scheme is. And thank you so much for your kind comments and suggestions. Well, that's all for me for now, and I'll catch up with you in the garden next time.